The arguments for local economy are largely apolitical. We think that if we have a voluntary society, we will get further along. We'll have more justice, more prosperity, and we'll have real gains in society. However, we do have a political system which is about the exercise of law, the adding of laws, the subtracting of laws, and we have elections and campaigns focusing on who or whom will be those people writing the laws, or if you're talking about the governor's race, people executing the statute in the state of Tennessee. So we're not going to be free from positive law for some long time, though we have hopes for maybe the next century there being alternative systems that are less political, maybe apolitical, that are more society-centered rather than legislature-centered. But we can dream about that another time. Right now, we want to talk about a campaign for governor. The primary is in August of 2018, and the general election in November of next year. There are on the Democrat side 2 candidates for governor. There's a man named Craig Fitzhugh. Carl Dean is the other one. On the Republican side, there's Randy Boyd, Diane Black, who's a federal legislator, Beth Harwell, Speaker of the House, Bill Lee, Kay White, and then finally there's Mae Beavers. Mae Beavers was most recently in the Chattanooga area at a Constitution Patriotic event in Dayton, and that I'm aware of, and she is the candidate standing on a long record in the state Senate, about 15 years. She'd also been in the state house, and all before that was a county commissioner. Mae Beavers is an elected official who is not, in a way, she's not very imaginative, and I'd say that's probably to her credit, and that is because she's more mindful of the limits of the Constitution against the state than are other members of that august body in Nashville. And now that she's running for candidate, she is running on the record that is to say that of towing the constitutional line as closely as she can, given momentary limitations on that kind of action. But Mae, thanks for giving a minute or two of your time here to the David Tulis Show in Chattanooga at Nooga Radio. How has the campaign been going, Mae? Where have you been in the past week? What are you telling people, and what kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, we have been very busy. Last night we were at T-Bones and Politics down in Murfreesboro in Rutherford County. That's an event that traditionally Joe Carr has put on. Has a special guest come in. Last night we had Judge Janine Pirro, who did a fantastic job. There was about between 700 and 800 people there, and I was very honored when they introduced me to get a standing ovation, and then a standing ovation when I finished. And I think that's because I am talking about the issues. None of the other candidates have been really talking about the issues that we need to address as governor. And I've been freely discussing them and telling them my opinion about things and what needs to be done. And so we're making the other candidates early on in the campaign talk about issues.
Well, you say issues. Can you enumerate maybe the top 3 or the most important 3 issues that you've raised in the campaign thus far? Ones that my listener would care most about, Mae Beavers.
Well, Common Core curriculum, education. We're talking about technical schools, needing more technical schools in the state of Tennessee to train people so they can earn better wages. We're talking about the opioid crisis. Half the employers in Tennessee tell me they can't find anyone to hire because they're on drugs. We're talking about faith-based ministries that we know about that are actually addressing those problems without getting people hooked on Suboxone and methadone. And so we're just getting down to the nitty-gritty about these are definite problems. We can't overlook them anymore. And it's making the other candidates. We're talking about the gas tax. I was against the gas tax. You do not tax people when you have a $2 billion surplus. And I'm the only candidate that has said we will roll back the gas tax. That will be proposed in my first budget.
Well, the supporters of the gas tax, which included many Republicans, many conservatives, they will say, well, if you cut back the gas tax, you're going to have to increase taxes elsewhere that were removed. Talk about the trade-off in the bill that passed, and why the trade-off is not in the favor of my listener, Mae Beavers.
Well, the trade-off was 1 cent off off the sales tax on food, and when you really look at it, when truck drivers have their diesel fuel go up, it's going to cost more to deliver those goods to market, and therefore the cost of your food, clothing, and everything else is going to go up. Another one was the hall income tax, which we had voted last year that we would gradually eliminate until it was all gone. Thanks to Representative Mark Pody, who stood up on the floor, went against leadership, and proposed that amendment, so they had to do it. That was going to happen this year, regardless of whether or not we increase the gas tax or not. So it's a little disingenuous. That only affects a small number of people really in the state of Tennessee. Unfortunately, for some of those people who have scrimped and saved and, made investments and are earning interest on dividends, they were the ones having to pay that. Also, the other tax was on franchise and excise tax for manufacturers, which only affected about 25 manufacturers in the state of Tennessee. If we needed to reduce the franchise and excise tax because it was more burdensome than other states, then we needed to do that, and we had the surplus to do it. We had a $2 billion surplus. At the end of this fiscal year, we had another $770 million come in. So it's a little disingenuous to claim that we gave everybody a tax break, because we just did not. And of course, I voted against all of that. I'm sure I can see the mailers now when they come out. Mae Beavers voted against reducing the hall income tax or whatever. But it just didn't make sense to increase taxes when we had the money. It was just they wanted a dedicated fund, they said, for the roads. So some of the House members proposed that we take 1/4 cent of the sales tax that we're currently getting, dedicate that to roads. There was nothing wrong with that. Then you add on top of that in the last 6 years, the budget has gone up 32%. I doubt if anybody in Tennessee has had a 32% increase in their income in the last 6 years.
Well, going back to the opioid crisis, Mae Beavers, you're a candidate for governor. What do you propose that the state can do from your position would be as the head of the executive branch? What could the executive branch do by way of either legislation to be passed by the people's houses or through executive power on that crisis? What is to be done?
Well, and of course I have to have the vote of the legislature, but a governor has a lot of influence with the legislature and can include anything they want to in their budget. I know that doesn't mean that it'll pass the House and Senate, but I will say in my time down there that when a governor proposed a tax decrease, it has always been passed. I'm trying to remember now if I've actually had a governor propose a tax decrease. Back during Governor Bredesen's administration, I proposed a 1/2 cent off the sales tax on food. We had $1.5 billion surplus that year. And the governor really didn't want to do it, but we ended up getting that done. So a lot of it depends on your legislature. I'm very well aware of that, but we'll make a good case for decreasing taxes when you have a huge surplus.
Well, what about the opioid crisis? What about that specifically, Mae?
Well, the opioid crisis, we've traveled around Tennessee, and the employers are telling us we can't find anybody to hire. Half the people that we interview are on drugs, and so it's a huge crisis. And I'll use actually a program that we have at our church called Crossbridge, where it's a 501c3. They raise their own money. They are helping men and women who come out of jail. They're helping them to get off of drugs. And the director has told me the Suboxone and the methadone are just keeping them addicted. She's the only way to go is just cold turkey. And they're helping these people. They're helping them if they need to get their GED. If they wish to go on to college, they've actually had some people go on to finish at Trevecca and make a life for themselves, help them get jobs. And so I've been to West Tennessee and run into a similar program down there. And I know that the Nashville scene in Nashville, one of our kind of crazy publications, they tweeted out after I started talking about this, Mae Beavers thinks Jesus is the answer to the opioid problem. And I said, well, while that's true, that's not all I said. But I think that government can use some of these faith-based programs instead of creating more and more government programs to address people's addictions.
What if you said on the campaign trail, Mae Beavers, about Common Core, and what is your report, if you will, on what other candidates are saying either for or against this system in the school program?
First of all, I've never heard another candidate address it. Well, I did hear Speaker Harwell last night say that we got rid of Common Core, and then when I spoke, I pretty much told the audience the standards were rewritten and renamed, and no, we still have Common Core. In fact, the legislation that was passed in Washington, ESSA, pretty much put Common Core in stone so that we can't do anything about it. And so we need to work on electing some congressmen and U.S. senators that will address that issue. I'm saying that I'm for returning more control to the local levels. President Trump signed an executive order not too long ago, returning more control to the state level as far as education. And I think we need to do the same as far as our local school boards and let them make more decisions. One of the pieces of legislation that I really agree with that the Tennessee School Board Association pushed this last year that did not pass was to let local school boards decide whether or not to use the ACT or to use the standardized testing that we're using right now. The standardized testing we're using right now is costing over $100 million a year. They can't get the test scores back on time. And as you probably have heard, it's pretty much a data collection program on our children also. And I had to sponsor a piece of legislation a couple of years ago that would have let parents and teachers actually review the questions on the test. It's upsetting to me that we have things that our kids are seeing in school that our teachers and parents are not allowed to view. And they put an $800,000 fiscal note on it, said we'll have to rewrite the test every year. But when we had the test debacle where the server went down last year and we had the commissioner in my committee, I asked her, well, since the server went down, some children were halfway through the test, others were finished, others didn't even get started. What about the ones that saw some of the test questions? Won't you have to rewrite those tests according to what you told me last year? Oh, no, we just scramble the questions, and let them take the same test. So, I'm like, what's going on here? The teachers, the parents should know what's going on in the classroom. Why are we keeping it from them?
We're talking with Mae Beavers. Thanks for joining us here at Nooga Radio. David Tulis. I'm asking another question now. Governor Haslam in 2015, Mae Beavers capitulated against Christianity. He is a Presbyterian elder. His Attorney General, Herbert Slattery III, is also a Presbyterian, an ordained Presbyterian man in Christianity. But they rejected Christianity and allowed to be imposed, and thereby imposed upon Tennessee the queer definition of marriage, submitting to Obergefell versus Hodges. Every attorney will say, well, the high court's opinions are in fact law. And they presuppose the theory of judicial supremacy. Mark Pody and maybe you have offered a different argument, and that's called the constitutional supremacy. What do you say about the head of the state's government capitulating to an opinion in the lowest branch of the federal power? Would you do the same? Would you defend marriage, Mae Beavers?
I would defend marriage. I was one of the co-sponsors on defining marriage that was put before the people as a constitutional amendment. Over 80% of the people in Tennessee voted to define marriage in the Constitution. And I was actually the Senate sponsor on Representative Pody's bill, the Defense of Marriage Act. And I don't think the federal government or the courts should have any say in what we do as far as marriage in Tennessee. They need to get hands off. I would have never ordered the clerks of the courts that they have to issue marriage license to gay couples.
Well, what about the state making another step that would be a way of remediating this problem, and that would be to say that that Tennessee should not at all be involved in marriage to begin with, and that marriage, it is a common law right, though Tennessee in its statute pretends to have evacuated and eviscerated that right. It is my listener has a right to marry at common law, he and his wife, by God-given, inalienable, and inherent right. Why not propose that Tennessee get out of the marriage business entirely, especially since its definitions and its practice can be corrupted externally by federal autonomy, if you will?
Right, and the federal court, the Supreme Court does not make law, and I don't know what it takes to make people understand. We have attorneys on Judiciary Committee that do not understand that concept. The Supreme Court can rule on whether or not they think a statute might be constitutional or not, but then it's effectively up to Congress or to the state legislators to go back and change the law to make it whatever they want it to be. So our Supreme Court has made a lot of bad decisions in the last few years, and we need to stand up to them. I very much believe in the 10th Amendment, where we tell the feds, we're not going to do this. If they cut our money off, so be it, if it's the right thing to do. On the gas tax this last year, we sent a resolution that I sponsored to Congress, to President Trump, asking them to take the mandates off of the money that we get back on the roads. Right now, we can spend less than half of it on roads because of their mandates, and I haven't heard back from anyone in Congress.
So in that allocation to state government by Washington, half is usable on roads that is collected under the gas tax, but the other half goes for bike lanes, rest centers?
Welcome centers, bike lanes, walking trails, sidewalks, even historic structures, just a myriad of things that people don't understand that their gas tax money is actually going there. And why should we be increasing gas taxes when, we would have plenty if they would just take the strings off of the money that we get back?
Well, how strong a proponent are you of the idea of Tennessee having sovereignty? The way to get sovereignty back very clearly would be to take less federal money and do with less good cheer out of Washington's cash box. That seems to be very difficult to do, though, to say, well, we'll take less. Are you really, do you have the strength in your mind and in your ideas to be willing for Tennesseans to have less federal revenues coming in for the purpose of asserting state sovereignty? Mae Beavers.
I have probably sponsored more sovereignty legislation than anybody in the legislature. A few years ago, I had the healthcare compact, which would have allowed us to join a compact with other states to get back our health care money, our Medicaid money, as a block grant and let us decide how to spend it. And of course, that went nowhere. Interestingly enough, right now, Lindsey Graham is proposing to send the money to states as block grants. The big question is, if they send it to us as a block grant, would they take all the strings off, or would they still be telling us how to spend the money? But I'm a big proponent. I sponsored and passed the Tennessee Firearms Freedom Act a few years ago that said that firearms, ammunition, and accessories that were manufactured in Tennessee, that the federal government didn't have any say over them. Of course, our federal firearms dealers are afraid to go against the federal government. They're afraid they'll have their license yanked, but that is on the books. Later tried to amend that to say that if federal agents ever come to Tennessee and try to take our guns, that our local law enforcement, our state law enforcement would stand up to them to the point of arresting them if they had to. And that's when the chairman of Judiciary Committee told us that the Supremacy Clause trumps our Second Amendment rights. If I'm not mistaken, they wrote the Constitution, and then they had a Bill of Rights that they wanted to be guaranteed that people understood what they were talking about, and they gave us, therefore, the Second Amendment to the Constitution.
There's a growing movement in Christianity, Mae Beavers, that says that abortion should be abolished and that Christians should not be, and conservatives and moral people should not be ashamed of clamoring and fighting for the abolition of that barbaric practice. That means that there's not much patience among these Christian pro-lifers for halfway measures, cutting funding, let's say, to Planned Parenthood. That's not really adequate. There needs to be a demand and a call for the abolition of this practice, and a criminalization of the killing of children, male and female, black and white, and Hispanic, who are in utero. How strong are you on the demand? How strong are your sympathies for the demand for total abolition of baby killing?
Oh, let me say this. I don't think that we have the right to determine who lives and who doesn't live. And that's exactly what's happening when you have abortion going on in the state of Tennessee. I've probably passed as many or more abortion laws than anybody in the legislature. And I think it's very disingenuous of a congressman to say, I sponsored a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. I'm against Planned Parenthood. I'm against killing babies. And yet they go ahead and vote for Obama's budget that includes funding Planned Parenthood. Somewhere you've got to take a stand and follow through with what you're saying that you believe.
Well, okay, that you're talking there about Diane Black, the federal representative, right?
Right.
Well, my question, though, if you could go a little further to answering it, and that is the abolition of the killing of children who are black, boys and girls, by people in Tennessee who are often not licensed. They don't have state licenses. And the question is, should abortion be regulated, or should abortion be abolished as a barbaric practice in Tennessee?
It should be abolished. We have passed laws. I passed a law that required hospital privileges for abortion doctors a few years ago. And because, your doctor has to have hospital privileges if he performs, surgery on you in the office, and then you have complications, he should be able to meet you at the hospital, somebody that knows your case. But with abortion doctors, that was not true. So by passing that one law, we had an abortion clinic in Knoxville that had been around for 28 years. The doctor went and got his hospital privileges, and they eventually closed that abortion clinic because of that one bill. So, we have passed restrictions to try to cut down on the number of abortions because that's all we could do at the time, because abortion is legal. But I think we need to go all out in opposing abortion and trying to get rid of it completely.
We're talking with Mae Beavers, David Tulis here at Nooga Radio. Mae Beavers, former state senator and candidate for governor. Thank you for talking with me and my listener this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is David Tulis, and I'd say that Mae Beavers is close. She's close to the kind of candidate that you, my listener, want to have in the governor's seat. There are some issues that she's not addressing, but they are ahead of where she's likely to be anyway, given that she's in political office and holds office today. And these are ideas that we're thinking about. That would be, for example, the abolition of the killing of black girls and black boys and others in utero. The governor has high authority, and there needs to be someone in authority who believes in the right to life, who believes that black people have a right to live, even if they're very small, and also people who are of other colors and other races, male and female, as God made them. David Tulis, thanks for joining me.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4.